Without much ado, let's open the floor and let's hear from you. Let's keep it short and sharp. We want to engage with as many of you in the room as possible. So, yeah, let's go. Who wants to go first? At the back, we've got a hand. I do hope it means something that it's a man. We're going to have a really meaningful engagement with the question of patriarchy.
Number one, I'm not discriminating.
Please just introduce yourself for us.
I'm Bantu Hajani. I'm an author. I can go on and on. A publisher. And let me start there as a publisher. One of my key mottos is that I allow space for everybody to express himself or herself. Nobody and nobody should limit the other for expression. Number one. And if you are limited, they deny you freedom. Number one. But however, there are rules. Even in language, there are rules. And let me quickly also go to the other speaker, is that I've got a problem about the term disabled. Disabled from what? Number one, and shortly in 1 minute, if there are different fruits of different colors, you can't say an apple is disabled from banana and orange. They are differently abled. So there is nothing, there is nobody disabled. So it depends on the terminology, on the mentality, the linguistic terminology you use. And number two, in terms of nationalism, who sets the standard or whatever, I belong to the human race and I espouse the human rights values. Nationalism comes after human race. So human race, nationalism, it's a human construct. But God actually started human being. I may go on and on. Started human being without setting the national boundaries. Thank you.
I think are you clear on what was raised around language? I think that one was directed to you, Babalwa. Are you clear on the question around language?
Yes.
All right, okay. Further questions? Thank you so much for that.
Well, thank you so much. Greetings to everyone. My name is Babalwa. I'm a rooftop farmer in the inner city in Hillbrook. It's quite interesting that we're having this debate now, where we have our young kids and we are taking back to grassroots, that we need to go back as mothers who are raising boys and girls to teach them the right language in the house. Because Mama Nomasonto have raised an important thing. It's women in diversity, how we're acknowledging women in all diversity. Because before they get to corporate, they started at home. So what do we do as mothers at home? Do we have different chores for boys, different chores for girls? So it's back to us going back to the roots and saying, how do I raise my children? Because the roles are now reversed, because in corporates we're raising a girl child and we're leaving a boy child. So the whole role has changed. So I think it's for us to go back as mothers and say, how are we raising our children? Thank you.
I'll take another one. Third question. Oh, here's one in front. One of my favorite colleagues, Professor Mazibuko.
No, I just wanted to comment on, the issue about mothers and raising boys and girls, that it seems as if, we're putting a lot of responsibility on the women. That the problems that we are seeing in our society, it's a result of, women, that, as women, we are not doing our jobs. And I find that to be very problematic, because I think what our children become is a result of their society around them. I mean, I'm raising a boy and a girl in the house. And as a feminist, I treat them the same in the house. My daughter is over there, she's 9. I treat them the same. You know, they have same responsibilities and all of those things. But then, you know, they go outside and they go into this society, this patriarchal society that tells them a different story, you know. And I mean, it's unfair. So I just wanted to comment on this thing that it's unfair to put this responsibility on women. Men need to speak up and take their responsibility as fathers, as mothers, as parents. It's a core, you know, it's a core responsibility.
Thank you so much for that, Magoqwana. I think we're going to first hear from our panelists, and then we'll take the next round of questions. Please hold that thought. Who wants to kick us off? Nomasonto.
Thank you very much to the author. Bananas and oranges will never be the same. And it's unfortunate, but the bananas themselves, I've got two types of bananas. Those bananas that were picked from bushbuck-reef, and the bananas that I bought from Woolworths. Disability, well, God can create us all, but I would like us to get into the issue of looking at people as they are. I'm not the same as the two people around me. And Africa believes in color. I don't have that color. I must talk about it. I lack melanin in my eyes, in my hair, and in my skin. Then it disables me, because if I get into this room, am I like Christi? No, I'm not white to be Christi. Am I black like Nhlapho here? No. So Nhlapho must explain to her children to say, this is Mam Nomasonto, not a white woman. So my brother, please let's talk about it. It's there, it exists, so embrace me and not take it to God. Because I find it very annoying, Eusebius, all the time, when people say she is her mother's child, but I'm God's creation. No. And Africa, when I go to Africa, don't make a mistake, I'm not being xenophobic. In South Africa, none of the people with albinism have been killed. It came from Tanzania, came down. Now I'm a lucky charm. That is why I'm saying it's good that Nhlapho is here. She will take us further to say, why are my body parts sold for multi-purposes? And this side, Africa says we don't have muti from people. We've got muti from herbs, and we've got muti from animals. Thank you. Yeah.
I would like to explain again in an African context what is when we say gender. In my field, when I say gender, I don't mean he is a man because he's wearing pants. No. So this thing of like, this is a man, this is a woman, it's new to us, we don't know it. So if we were to go back and say, what do we mean when we call someone a woman or a man? That is where we should be starting. Because we will know that I can't say wash dishes because, I mean, you have a penis. No. What if that boy is feminine? That is why they prefer to wash dishes. Like in my own family, my grandmother will go to the garden, will plant, will be busy with flowers. My grandfather will be cooking. And that's where I come from. Because I mean, it was not about who's wearing pants, who's wearing a skirt. So we lost it when we took another philosophy that we don't know. While we have our own way as Africans to define. Again, now we're seeing lesbians and gays being killed in the township, and then we told that our religion is saying this is new. That is nonsense. We've had that from way back, our great-grandparents, they lived with it, they had a way to define it. That is why we find in Ubugoma, we have our go. We don't have an issue with that, but when are we going to be here? Why are we not contributing to this debate? Because we've got solutions. We never had a problem in Africa with this.
Thank you so much.
Just to link up to the previous speakers and also try and answer that one, I wish we had more time in this debate because we're not doing justice to some of the things. Seriously. Let me just put that language, the power of language, and how it carries meaning, especially, let's say, for African people in general. You know, this idea of saying the Muti killers, we see it all over in the news. And once you go to the issue of language, you notice that Umuti is actually derived from a tree, okay? It's medicine, ne? But how, the fact that our journalists sometimes and our media people don't even understand the meaning of what Umuti is, which is about healing sometimes, ne? And then you translate it into some sort of an onslaught. Every time we see Umuti and killings, we're like, yes, Muti and killings. But there's something fundamental about linking the tree to medicine in Africa. But let me just speak to something that disturbed me earlier on. The issue of motherhood, it's coming up very quickly here. And I want to address it in the sense that there was a lot of debate in the 50s, 60s, and 70s in South Africa amongst women, where African women were accused of not prioritizing gender in the national struggle, okay? And this has translated into people saying that, no, the ANC or the national struggle was racialized rather than gendered. But we know that the idea of motherhood for the apartheid state was used to reproduce the empire, okay? It was used to reproduce the future white supremacist society. I think Christi writes about that as well, the Volksmutter, okay? But when it comes to African women, the idea of motherhood, it was not just about what is the gendered nature of motherhood. It was consciousness. It was about class consciousness. Women as breadwinners in the household. Women as workers. And people were speaking to the consciousness that can help us to politically organize, rather than this reduction of motherhood, especially amongst black women, as a sort of, it was so gendered, it was not just about gender. It went across to class and race, because motherhood in Africa, as Amajume says, it is about the spirit of common motherhood, consciousness, love, compassion, and anyone can be a mother. That's why Oyumi says, what gender is there for motherhood?
Yeah, I want to say two things. I'm going to disagree slightly with you, Babalwa. I think that your point about motherhood is absolutely beautiful and spot on in terms of giving it historical texture. I don't think we must romanticize ways in which women have been, not always through autonomy and freedom, choosing to play the kind of role that you are talking about. So if we want to be nuanced, we're going to have to recognize that some women were compelled to remain in the kitchen, not out of some deep feminist choice that you are making to be the matriarch in the family. My mom was told by my dad, you will not go out and work. And when she got divorced to him, she was left destitute. She coincidentally happens to bake a very good milk tart, but we can't romanticize that fact without understanding that her survival of his patriarchy makes her a gold standard for a kind of feminism that hadn't been recognized, that was being baked in the kitchen. Right? And I think that's very important. For me, it is about freedom, it's about choice, it's about autonomy, and there are many ways of being a woman. Fatima Shawadeen, yesterday on my show, gave a beautiful example of her own mom, who was that matriarch at home, but who was also the first woman on the Cape Flats to become a taxi driver. So there is complexity there, many different roles that women have taken on in the 70s and the 80s, the 60s, right into 2019. But fundamentally, she made the distinction, which I thought was a beautiful distinction, between surviving patriarchy as a woman wearing different hats and the structure of patriarchy itself not yet being addressed and being eliminated. And I think for me that's pretty important.
Thank you. We've got our first question in the front here.
Thank you. My question comes back
Just
to...
tell us us who you are.
Oh, my apologies. My name is Kanye Kanyile. I am in corporate. I'm an employee relations manager. One of my issues is that patriarchy, in order for any systemic abuse, in order to survive, requires foot soldiers. And I found one of the biggest proponents of patriarchy are women. And my biggest issue is the language that is used in them describing and saying, a woman has to be strong and imboroto, and on the other hand, she also has to be nurturing. And can everybody hear me? Okay. She also has to be nurturing. The two qualities are great, and they work well together, and they should be espoused by everyone. However, in saying she must be strong and imboroto, it is only insofar as she stomachs the systemic abuse of patriarchy. And I'd like to have your views on that.
Hello, my name is Eugenia. I'm just listening around this room today. I'm asking myself, women and mother are used interchangeably. And we seem to be excluding a woman who is not a mother. What is her role in society? Can we define a woman outside a mother?
I have the mic. Thank you.
Ladies.
My name is Sebenzile. I am a broadcast journalist. At the risk of asking that we center big men for a second, is the argument being made here that what is being said and told in the narrative around the big men is fine, and the only problem is that we don't hear about the women, right? Because I'd make the argument that us knowing more about a Charlotte Maxeke, a Mama Winnie Mandela, is not going to make an Apartheid Museum, put Charlotte Maxeke's first vehicle down or upstairs and have us celebrate it to the extent that we do the big men. So how do we counter that? Because not talking about the big men, they don't disappear, they remain there, right? And they take up a ton of space, they take up a lot of space. So how do we begin to address that? And as somebody who is in the business of storytelling, I wonder if we perhaps started to humanize these men more, if that would in any way go a bit further, in perhaps removing them from this pedestal that we placed them, right? If we start to speak about how a lot of these stalwarts were wife bashers, right? Oh, we don't want to go there? they, of course, by the time we eulogize people, right, they sound like deputy Jesuses, because maybe we could argue that it's un-African to make, to speak about the not so great things, but the impact of that is what we have currently, where we have so many stalwarts and so many people to celebrate, so many women to celebrate, but we don't because we have idolized these big men. They take up so much space, but in essence, we don't tell the full story of their contribution to society and who they were as human beings first and foremost. Love your thoughts on that.
Thanks so much, Cindy. Great to see you again, actually.
Good afternoon, everyone. A happy Goddess Day, happy Warriors Day, happy everything. I owe it all to the women in my life. I would like to know the abuse in this country. Sorry, my name is Faisal. I would like to know, how do we slowly educate men especially, or how can we stop the abuse? And where does this come from? Does it start at home? Who is to blame? I'd like to slowly see men actually embracing women instead of abusing them. Thank you.
Let's hear from our panelists at this point in time. Do you want to kick off?
Hello, Sebenzile. Lovely seeing you. I'm only going to respond to one. I don't want to take up too much space as a big man. Faisal, I'm going to speak to you from one man to another. There are at least two interesting questions. There's one question for historians and sociologists like Christi and Babalwa about the origins of patriarchy. Let's set that aside. Then there's a crisis in the present moment. What are we going to do about it, whatever the cause? As long as we know its nature, how it works, we can ask the question, what can we do about it? The historical question is also interesting, but for the purpose of changing society, I actually don't need to address it. It's not a mystery what we need to do. You and I rape. You and I discriminate against women. You and I demote a woman who falls pregnant. You and I are the ones, or let me talk for myself, but even within the queer community we are patriarchal. Many queer men have horrible slurs about women that they bandy about. Go away, you smell like fish, you, and think it's funny. So we are the ones who must take the responsibility. I totally agree with you. And we are the ones who need to sit in men's circles and begin to ask, why do we have a sense of ownership over women's bodies? Why do we feel emasculated when Babalwa becomes the head of the department? Why is it so hard for me to recognize that parity in wages and salary is critically important? And I don't think it's a mystery what needs to be done. It takes a couple of champions to step up to the plate and to accept you're going to get some flack. I, for example, on a weekly basis, get a bunch of men on Twitter saying to me, why do you hate men so much, Eusebius? I mean, in a world that rewards me for even being a weak ally of women. So even when you are a weak ally of women, you still get the benefits that come with patriarchy per se. And I think we need a separate conversation next to this one. All the men in this room, and your fathers, your brothers, your friends who are male, must come back tomorrow and we can begin that work. And that work is work that we must start because we are the perpetrators, so we are perfectly fluent in how to dismantle patriarchy because we are fluent in perpetrating it.
And just to what Eusebius was saying earlier on about the kitchen and the mother being forced, I'm not saying that patriarchy did not exist. What I'm saying is that the point of departure in trying to understand the African society might help us to see how were the power relations structured and how did that affect the post-colonial society. That's point number one. Remember, in the apartheid system, black women did not have a choice between the kitchen or the public sphere. You know, you were everything at once. So it was complex. The state could come in your kitchen as you're busy baking and then take you to prison. So you really did not have a private space to say, okay? And let me speak also to the question of, you know, we need to be nurturing and be tough at the same time. Unfortunately, that's the reality. We need to be tough and caring. Just like a man has to be tough and caring, all of us have to be tough and caring because the capitalist system is coming for all of us, unfortunately. But the problem of that is growing that I've noticed is that the heteronormative feminine woman who's like, you know, Instagramming and all of that, they are becoming more fashionable. You know, I don't know, maybe it's just my, you know, perspective, but they're becoming more fashionable. Back in the day, there used to be a full-figured woman, a woman who had so many different colors. But right now we have this lifestyle, virgin active kind of woman who's riding on Saturdays, who's fit, and the men have to have muscles and six-pack. The kind of physicality that is reversing feminist gains that were made, especially in the 1970s. So that is my kind of take in terms of the physical, in terms of strength and also the physical desirability of women today.
I think just briefly, how do we stop the abuse? I'll go back to saying you cannot stop the abuse in a political sense because it doesn't happen in government offices. It happens in societies. So these societies are made of broken families. I come from one, others come from one. Until we fix the family structure, it is not going to change because I'm going to come out of that family broken and I'm going into society and I'm angry and I'm hating. I'm going to hate another person. So when we are unlearning, when we are relearning, we need to go back to families, which is what I'm saying, the problems that we have. I can stand and shout, men are trash, men are all bad. What made them to be trash? Can we deal with the symptoms? Can we deal with the symptoms? Again, in my world, the spiritual world, I don't symptoms, I go to the root cause. What caused it? If I were to hit someone, what caused, what's the root cause? Not that you've got a boy here, what caused it? So again, if you want to deal with social ills, women, I mean, for instance, I watch the TV programs, there's this channel, famous one, there's a show, Ufedan. I cannot stay or cry every time I watch Ufedan. Because you look, say, okay, the show is playing, this young girl is taken care of by this young man, and then she's going to be killed. And then you look at all the red flags, no one is addressing them. And you say, as a society, why don't you go back and say, these are the causes, why don't we deal with them? No, we're just watching the show, we cry and we go to sleep.
Anybody want to just address Segunzile's direct question about, the humanization of men?
I agree with you, Babalwa. I think it's a really interesting one, especially for an academic, in terms of curriculum development. Do we just add on great women, or do we tell the true story about horrible big men? I think we should. I agree with you, Bob.
This is the thing. For me, the dualism that we tend to create when you talk about patriarchy sometimes can be a problem. In as much as we understand that there's a man who was part of history, there was also a woman who was part of history. But the manner in which the curriculum has been created, obviously, if you read 15th century European history, during the Enlightenment, they had to kill women before men could exist as laws. Yeah, European women who were witches, who were sorcerers, who were knowers, they had to be killed. And then we had Enlightenment. So what I'm trying to say is that sometimes the science in itself was designed for a particular kind of body. But it is up to us, we have an opportunity right now to include all sorts of colors, all sorts of shapes, and all sorts of women in the curriculum and in the media as well. I was listening to lots of shows the past few weeks talking about how women are underrepresented in the media space, and headlines, if you're looking at the newspapers, mostly it's like big men in front. We have a responsibility as well to not to be too dualistic when we approach inclusive society.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope my legs will hold out. I'm really feeling like my heart is pounding. This is such a passionate issue for me. My name is Melissa. If you wanted to give me a title, I'm not really big on titles, but you could call me Imara, mother of Imara. I'm speaking to you as a believing Muslim woman and a person who was a coordinator of Masjid al-Islam in Brixton in Johannesburg for 6 years. And I want to speak on how patriarchy and misogyny reinvents itself. It is not satisfied with just taking over our sacred spaces and our institutions and our homes and our schools. That patriarchy and misogyny is also trying to eat its way into the feminist space via very conniving means, by manipulating the language of feminism by proxy, by employing women as deputies who are competing against each other to do all the hard work in the feminist movement, while the men are still claiming the glory. And I'm speaking specifically about the Muslim community here in South Africa. And I might also add, and this is the hard part, while I, on the surface, seemingly had all of this power in the community as a decision maker in my mosque, I realized that the closer I got to the decision-making processes of the mosque, the less close I was to God, and the closer I was to the power of patriarchy, misogyny, and the ego, and I was being abused in my own home. And the minute I stood up, and my ex-husband is a stalwart of the anti-apartheid community in South Africa and is well known, and his sons and my ex-husband were abusing me, and as soon as I stood up to them, and as soon as I stood up in the mosque community and advocated for equality for women in the mosque space, I was ejected immediately by the community, and my Muslim feminist sisters who I served with for many years dropped me like a hotcake. Because of why? Because of who my husband was. So we need to now speak about how patriarchy and misogyny has employed numerous devious ways to not just take over our institutions and our families, but also take over the feminist space. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And then, yes, please go ahead. Tell us who you are.
My name is Tshepo Lugwampe, a youth activist, self-proclaimed feminist, member of the activist.
I would like our panel to also engage with that question of men as feminists.
Member of Activate Change Drivers, leader of the ANC League in Joburg. When I started, I was even telling the beautiful lady next to me to say, you know what, because now in this session we have many young people like me. That's one of the sexist things that we do, consciously or unconsciously. We just say, ladies first, as if it's a good guest or something like that. Maybe just to explain that first part, what I did earlier on, to say those are some of the things that we do as males, consciously or unconsciously. But what I wanted to speak to is the following. Stats SA last week, I think, released their stats, and they were saying with the unemployment rate at 27%, the most affected were young, black, and female. And the last part will say female. And even according to our young females as well, they didn't want to mention that part. They will just say, yeah, no, it's only us young people who are black that are generally not employed. Which for me has always been a problem to say, why is it that females don't want to actively deal with this issue of patriarchy in the country? Or maybe I should put it this way. We know very well in the...
I think you'll have to give more details there, because I think women have been struggling against patriarchy in many different ways over many decades. So I think that would be a bit of a strange and sweeping statement that's not actually grounded in fact.
Okay. Perhaps I would also fundamentally differ. Because many females, they feel that bashing at males is what feminism is all about.
Oh, wow.
That's one of the things that I always say. In the east of South Africa, we always had this thing of white people can't participate in the national liberation movement. And we have always said, even though white people are benefiting from the system, not all of them are actually racist, but they're benefiting from the racist system that we have in the country. And that is what is currently also happening with other males in the country. Some might actually be supporting the struggle of females, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're equally not benefiting from the system itself.
Okay, I think we got your point.
The last point that I wanted to touch on...
Are you going to wrap up in the next
Yeah,
few
I
seconds?
just wanted to touch on this issue. I'm from Naledi, Soweto, where June 16 started. And one of the issues that I've always had a problem with is that perhaps maybe females are not writing more, or maybe their work is not published more. I will write about Sibongile Mkhabela, who was in the leadership core of the June 16. But many other people will preferably write about Tsietsi Mashinini and Khoto Seatul, who's also from the same area that I'm from. I'm raising all these issues coming from that background to say, that's why I was saying, perhaps maybe they are not doing more, or maybe we are not appreciating their efforts more. Because many cases you will find females fighting amongst themselves.
I see a hand in front of the pillar here. Sorry, if you could just come a bit forward, the woman with a microphone. Thank you so much.
Sibongile, well, I know her. She's part of the family.
Just tell us who you are.
Now, Mkhabela, it's me. Okay. Anthony, I'm a teacher at Pefeni Senior Secondary School. And one of the texts that we look at with it's a drama text that we look at with the learners. It's whether women should do men's work. And it's there in the text, and some of the points that you've raised are mentioned there. We have social constructs of human, we have political, we have economic, we have cultural, and we have social. I think the history itself has given us enough. But I would like to ask a question to all the panelists. Given the history and the knowledge that you have about how women have been constructed where do you want to take the women today? Because there are some women that are comfortable with the way they are and with the way they are treated. They are married and they follow tradition to the latter. And they will tell you that, no, we serve our men. And we are proud of that. We have those kind of women. If you want proof, I can take you to the rural areas. There are plenty of them. Okay? Now, my question is, we want to deconstruct. Okay, we want to deconstruct that. We want the women today, the young men, even the older ones, to change, but how do we want them to change? What are we doing? I want the way forward as to how are we going to implement this change. Because if we don't become drivers, as the panelists and as all the constituents here, okay, it's not going to happen. We're still going to come back and talk about women fighting against patriarchy. What are we doing to change that?
Well, I think this conversation will go on as long as this political problem remains, which is similar to the problem of racism, similar to the problem of heteronormativity, similar to the problem of the incredible socioeconomic inequality that's caused by capitalism. So just like we can't stop talking about those issues, we have to keep on talking about this issue until we've resolved it. The sir in front, you had your hand up?
Isn't the problem like the context and the circumstances that women come from, you know, because I think, sorry if I get your name, Ms. Babalwa just alluded earlier about the African woman, and then there was a direct response, which I thought was just like also using another woman from a different context and a different circumstance to respond to the woman that she was speaking on or speaking about. And I think that was the first issue, you know. I think also the second issue that I really wanted to raise.
Dr. Magoqwana, do you catch, or do we need to further explications?
Do you feel that my experience as an African woman and a Muslim woman are not, what are you saying?
No, I'm saying that the context and the circumstances of your experience as an African woman and experience of a Muslim woman or experience of a colored woman are different, such that when we then apply or when you have such talks or such engagements, we then have a blanket issues. So, no, it's patriarchy, let's deal with it this way, or let's deal with that without understanding the context.
That's very problematic, but continue.
Can I be protected? Just for the
I'll come back. You make assumptions about the category black, but I'll engage.
Our panelists will get an opportunity now to respond, but I think you do need to wrap up.
Yeah, I agree with the chair. It's just like it wasn't to hint out a problematic statement. Sorry if it's problematic, but I just wanted to us to say, is there a way in which we are looking at women in their respective contexts before we speak on issues in a blanket manner? Maybe that question, I should have phrased that clearly.
Okay. Do we have a question in the middle there? No. We've got a question in front here.
Can I?
Okay, go for it.
My name is Khatavia Pakis, and I'm a queer identifying woman. So once upon a time, I used to love a man, and the only reason I loved him was because, one of the reasons I really loved him was because he was one of those guys, when any guy trash talks a woman passing by, he would actually stand up to her, whether or not they know them. So this is just a tip coming from the queer community, especially when it comes to patriarchy, right? When I came out to my mom, what she asked me was, will you still be able to have children? And I was like, but I feel like as a woman, I'm also a womb holder. And this does not even say that I'm a superior woman, because we have different types of women. But this whole thing of also, I'd walk in the street, and when I'm with my partner and someone would be like, okay, so between the two of you, or if someone learns that we're actually gay, between the two of you, who's the man? I'm like, I guess we're both wearing pants, and we've got the womb, and we hold it, and we're the man, and yes, I think you get my point, but it's just one of those things, like someone says it, and it's your responsibility to say, hey, that's not the right question to ask. Hey, you can't say this to a person. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think just pass, did you want to ask Alida?
No.
Oh, you were pointing. That's my dear mother, actually. Okay, great. Please. Please just tell us who you are.
My name is Mandolwe Manana. And I was just going to say that I think it was really interesting to the gentleman at the back when he was talking and trying to raise issues about patriarchy or what he thought, like, you know, was substantial to add to the argument. There were a couple of problematic things that you said while you were trying to defend women in a sense. I think the first thing you acknowledged how you were like ladies first, and I think you were very quick to kind of almost correct yourself, but I don't know if you did that because you realized the problematicness in what you had said or because you were in a space that was going to check you if you did not check yourself. So I think one thing that I've noticed as a university student is that we do a lot of trendy things. A lot of people, because the hashtag men are trash is starting to trend, a lot of people want to kind of sound very socially informed and almost, yeah, they kind of want to sound trendy. And so because, I don't want to say men are trash is like a trend, but because it's a thing now people can say it sounds smart, that they sometimes use it as like a blanket statement when they don't actually believe what they say. So they think that they can kind of like use keywords like patriarchy or trash to kind of almost sound smart, but what they really believe within themselves isn't actually what they're saying. So I also want to say, when you said the beautiful lady next to you, I kind of found that problematic because that tends to happen a lot, and we don't give men similar like introductions. We spoke about how language is important. I think someone spoke about how we should talk about differently abled, not disabled in a sense. I think not police yourself, but I think it's very important for men almost here because I almost want to say everyone here who's had something problematic to say has been a man. Almost, I want to say, and I think one of the people who wanted to, I think there keeps being this like impression that I'm getting is that we're putting the responsibility of ending patriarchy on women. I think someone said, what are women doing? And and it's just like, it's not women's job only, like we can't do this. Not we can't do this by ourselves, but we live in a society where only specific kinds of people are listened to. And it also comes to like mobilizing the privilege that you have, right? So we were talking about how men and boys should start using their positions to at least speak about the issues that women have, because I can stand on the podium and talk about everything that I face as a young black woman in South Africa. No one will listen to me, versus if my boyfriend right here were to say the exact same things, chances are what he'd be saying would take a greater impact. It's kind of like the male voice, the power that the male voice has. I also think, because one of the panelists, I think Nomasonto said that we need to look at like where these problems come from. I do feel as though with something like patriarchy, it's not only from like the social standpoint, like it can't stand by itself. You can't just say that when you raise your boys, you need to raise them the same as you raise your like, when you raise boys, raise them the same as you raise girls, because I think one of the ladies in the front said that when she raises her children, she steps outside, they step outside, she's not there anymore, and it's society that also kind of tells them how to act as boys. So I think that it's kind of almost like simplifying a greater issue. It's not coming from a social standpoint because society doesn't stand in itself in the same way politics don't stand in themselves and economics don't stand in themselves. I think it's not like, you can't just start by language only. Like it's a good starting point, yes it is, but I don't think it'll solve the problem in its entirety. So in as much as you can give therapy to your son, it's not just like within your abilities to be able to solve such an issue like that. It's a good starting point, but it definitely has to come from like a lot of.
Great, thank you so much for that input. We have another question. We've got one in the front here. This is Advocate Ronaldo Jager. We were on a program actually about patriarchy, and we were actually also accused of bashing men. Men are very sensitive, sensitive creatures, it seems.
I said before, if the shoe fits, you know. What I would just like to comment on exactly what you said about the gentleman up at the top who claims himself to be a feminist and calls the woman next to him beautiful. I think you've said it, but I really felt that very strongly about that. I would like to reiterate, language is something that you should definitely be careful about. To the guy who said something about a man's work, I just have to say, what is a man's work? Please tell me that, because there's work and there's women and there are men. So please, it's also again language like that makes us, that's what patriarchy is all about. And to the gentleman that had said something around what are we going to do and how are we going to change it and make it better, and we just want to fight this fight, I would like to just say, and I also said it this morning, Christi will remember, equality does not mean that women want to be better than men. We are already good. That's not what we are fighting for. We are fighting for equal opportunities. And equal opportunities don't mean to say that we are fighting for something better. We just want better than what we get now. We do not want to get to the workplace and fight 10 times harder to make it just as far. It's not fair. And that's the thing, gentlemen specifically, because you don't know what it's like. You say things like the beautiful woman and you think it is something nice to say. It's not something nice to say. It's not something that I want to hear. I don't want you to call me a girl. I don't want you to say ladies first. I don't want you to, it's not the right way to do it. Just treat us equally, but with respect. Okay, that's all I
Is there another, I think we're going to allow for a final comment from the floor or question. Please go ahead.
My name is Nhlapho. I think it's much more of a statement more than anything. I co-own an organization called She Matters. This initiative, we started it with my partner. Basically, it is distributing sanitary bins to schools for female learners, because what we picked up, most of them would put them in their jackets and do all sorts of things to dispose them. And just to support Eusebius with what he had just said earlier on, the issue that we are having, we are trying to sort out female challenges in a space where leadership is led by men. So you may find out for whatever, if we try to go and come up with solutions from here, a man will be the guy who you need to go and knock on. And then he's just going to shove the whole issue on his desk because the issue does not affect him. So when we started approaching the Department of Education and schools, it will be each and every day, whenever we're driving in, we'll be like, oh gosh, the principal must better not be a man this time around again. Because he's just not gonna, the issue doesn't affect him to a point whereby we'll look for somebody, an HOD or somebody with less power, a deputy, just to get to a female. And you may find out that female will be excited, will mobilize other female teachers about the issue that is at hand. But the guy who is making decision at the top will be like, oh, we don't have a budget for this, we don't have, but like now, there will be all sorts of useless things which are being done with the money simply because the person who's making a decision, the issue does not affect him. Same in private sector. If we're approaching organizations like CSIs, you'll find out you're getting into a meeting with a bunch of men, and then the women who brought you into the meeting, who feel they are affected by the issue at hand, won't be given a chance. So I think with what Eusebius had said earlier on, for as long as we don't start on leadership and start collapsing the system, nothing that we are discussing, because at the end of the day, we may need funds to pump together like this for whoever is having a challenge in their own personal spaces. So I think we need to start collapsing from leadership, government, and private sector. Thanks.
Thanks so much for that. So in terms of our panel members, a few things that stood out for me that I would like you to address in your final comments, particularly around one of our first speakers who spoke about women who cover for powerful men. So of course we had recently a number of cases around sexual harassment in the non-governmental sector, where we actually saw similar tendencies. I think Eusebius is somebody who's addressed this also directly in his program. But this is a very important thing, because women are actually stepping forward, and despite the stigma, despite the shame that attaches to sexual violence and to being a victim of domestic violence and so forth. And they're actually taking men to task. And then you have men and women stepping forward to protect those perpetrators. And how do we make sense of that in this particular moment? Also, we had a question around what do we want to be doing with women? Where do we want to be taking women? Are we now deconstructing womanhood and destroying something that many women are actually apparently very happy with? So this idea of women as bashing men, so when women adopt a feminist position and they assert their rights, but also to be fully human, to be fully humanized, to accomplish their full human potential, then they are accused of bashing men and so forth. So, and then for me, under that whole thing of male bashing is the whole thing of how heteronormativity is used to actually discipline women. Especially, fortunately I'm a lesbian, so, I'm not, that can't be asserted in relation to me. But heterosexual women, if you want to continue being in a relationship with men, heteronormativity is frequently used to actually discipline you. Not to say that lesbians, of course, stand outside of heteronormativity, but that's another question for another day. But the way that heterosexuality and the heteronorm is used to actually discipline women who still want to continue being in sexual relations with men. And I think let's hear from our panel on those and any other issues that you would specifically like to address. Let's kick off. Thuli, do you want to?
I must say, I switched off immediately when someone said women from the rural areas. I'm from the rural areas. I grew up there. I'm a multi-award-winning journalist in South Africa and internationally. I'm the author of the best-selling book, and I'm from the rural areas. I started seeing TV when I was in grade 12. So why do we, as women from the rural areas, always we are represented, always someone is like, they know what we want, without asking us? Again, I'll go and ask, there's too much anger. This one is fighting men. You can't use that language. You can't use this one. Where is the space for a traditional woman in all this? Who said the traditional woman was a fool? They don't know what is toxic culture and what is good in culture. Has anyone asked us what can we take from our culture that is good and what do we need to leave behind? Amen. So I'm kind of tired of being represented. Because when I started, I said we're from diverse cultures and backgrounds. So we've got to take one background and say it works. Let me tell you one thing. The World Health Organization is saying 80% of Africans consult healers before going to the doctor or after. So when you are done with speeches, when your politicians are done, they come here and I sort them out.
Be careful of what you say in whatever space. Be careful what you say in whatever space. We are such a diverse people that we need to accommodate one another. Let us not talk for other people. People say women do this and this and this. But I am very proud of this team this afternoon because the person who was looking at diversity was straightforward. This is me talking to my counterparts, the men and the boys. So I find it very strange for men to be saying women. And to me it was an insult to say there are women who still are very calm with tradition, especially in the rural areas. It's unheard of. Incidentally, we will continue this conversation after this. It's very important because we are going to have that perception and share it with other men. We need to talk to one another. Where you are, right in the corner, where you are, and not say things that we have not researched. What we're saying here is research and the life that we have lived. So the change that we want to see starts within you. attacking. Don't attack people. Stop talking about issues that you don't know. What we need, we thank this opportunity today that people are enlightened. And let me tell you, we are prepared in this audience today to change perceptions, to change things that are happening, and protect the younger people who are sitting there. And I'm sure they themselves have changed their perceptions, and they will see a better South Africa tomorrow morning.
I just wanted to speak to the reinvention of patriarchy and also the co-optation of the feminist language. I think that is so powerful in the sense that we've already seen it in the audience. How you co-opt the language, feminism, and then you do the direct opposite. Yeah? So, and also the issue of patriarchy reinventing itself, we see it with the statements like traditional women. I'm from rural areas. I'm still there. I live there, even though I work in PE. But this is the same problem that we have seen with Jacob Zuma when he was tried for raping Ukwezi. And then he was like, according to Zulu culture, according to this. I made an example about Mbule Logoniwe. How can you refuse me, as a Xhosa girl? This is a misappropriation of culture. And if you do proper history, you understand that, when men went for immigrant labor, whether you're from Lesotho or whatever, men used to come back home and then they'll find their wives pregnant in the rural areas. And then the men will be told, will be asked on the side and be told that actually now you've got a new son. And then he won't ask questions. He will just take that boy as his. So, if that is the kind of tradition that you are alluding to, then we are happy with that. But the misappropriation of tradition, but also another part, just 2 minutes, Chris. The bull-head Down syndrome, it's so common, the PhD, and also it's another language that is being, it's misappropriating the feminist language about equality, saying that women fight amongst each other, women are competing with men, as if men don't. Men compete with each other, but what's wrong with women being individualistic when they want to? It's their choice. But it is not the pull-head Down syndrome, it's the system of patriarchy which is based on privilege of men. And we understand that men are not going to give us that privilege freely. Because when you have privilege, you're like, no, man. You've got power with privilege. And also the fact that when you put women in certain positions, in corporate, in governance, and then nothing changes, you must understand that power in itself is masculine. How you get into that power, when you add the woman in a position of power, it doesn't mean that things will change. Because in its construction, power as an entity, it is gendered. Yeah. The women who are not mothers, I'm also a woman, I'm not a mother, but I've got sons, my students, I've got daughters who are, my abachanabam, my cousins, but this is the thing, we mustn't be strict in categories. Because once you become strict in categories, then you're going to isolate transgender women, and then once you are strict in categories, then you are limiting freedoms. Remember, feminism was always about expanding freedoms. It was never about limiting freedoms through unnecessary categories. Thank you.
Why do you think we are here today and not yesterday or tomorrow? Here we are with 4 brilliant human beings on the panel who've all written against patriarchy, spoken against it. Their short bios are enough for you to be in awe of them. If you know their work beyond that, as I do, you will realize that they're not even exceptions. For decades, South African women have been fighting patriarchy intellectually, politically, social justice activism, and we are here today because today is an historical day that precisely speaks to how women galvanized across class differences, geographical differences, political differences to fight against the patriarchy in you and in me. And apparently, there is a complete historical record that is missing in your ANC Youth League leadership. I mean, Two, I don't think you disagree with Babalwa and me. I think there was and my apologies if for both of us interrupted you too quickly. I think you misspoke somewhat, if I may say that. But there's a core problem and there's detail. I don't think we don't understand the core problem. I think that's disingenuous, but I also don't believe that that's truly what you meant. The core problem we are here to think through is very simple. Why do we hate women? Simple. And why do we structure society, the academy, the public space, the domestic sphere, the economy in such a way that we perpetuate violence against women? And we are here to ask, what can we do practically to affirm, as all the panelists have said, the humanity of women that we nominally affirm in our constitutional jurisprudence, but that's not the reality in the details of society. Why is it a mystery to understand that? When we talk about racism, there's no mystery describing racism, even though there's detail to be fleshed out. But the core of white supremacy and anti-black racism isn't hard to understand. So why the hell is it hard to understand patriarchy? I mean, there isn't a problem there. But here's where I want to meet you halfway. But this is the next iteration of the conversation. Christi writes beautifully, and I recommend her book very highly in Sitting Pretty. And also, by the way, Color Me Yellow by Thuli, which is just, you're going to need tissues for that one. It's really beautifully written. About how complex, of course, gender is, to take one example. There are different ways of being embodied in a female manner in the world, right? So I get that. There are particularities to my colored mom's experience that will differ to Babalwa's mom's experience in the rural parts of the Eastern Cape compared to what my mom went through in an homogenous colored community in Makhanda. Of course there are differences, but I think those differences shouldn't be spoken about so wistfully that we lose sight of the basic problem that isn't actually a difficult problem to define. The rest is details. Just as in feminism, there are some white middle-class feminists who have very bad racial politics and stop talking once the conversation goes from gender to race. But there's a minimum threshold commitment to at least try and eliminate patriarchy, even if they are ignorant on race, that makes them also feminists next to Babalwa. And so we can talk about what should be in the footnotes on the additional chapter for your higher grade student. But let's not pretend that the basic problem cannot be crisply understood and stated.
I'm sure my audience will join me in really thanking this wonderful and stupendous and deeply insightful panel for really sharing your insights with us, sharing also your emotions, your passion, your incredible intellectual understanding. I do appreciate you being with us here today. And of course, our audience, thank you so much for you being here with us. Thank you everyone for attending. We always leave these sessions feeling that it could have lasted another 2 hours. But if it did, it might degenerate into a discussion that we perhaps do not want to have. And what we do take away from here always is a thought process that we engage in, an introspection, if I can call it that. That's what I take away from these sessions. Because a lot of the time we do practice things that we're not supposed to, and these sessions make us more aware of language, our social constructs, where we come from, our homes that we live in, the patriarchy that we experience, the racism that we perhaps carry within us, our biases and so forth. And these sessions really make you think harder about yourself. And perhaps when you walk away from here, you'll start to have introspection rather than outward dialogue that oftentimes is just about speaking.